Theory of Justice, Part 1, Theory, Chapter 1, Justice is Fairness. The second section of Chapter 1 is the subject of justice. I talked a little bit about this in the previous video when I was talking about the role of justice, and Rawls sort of laid some things out in a fairly, kind of in-your-face manner, and he says he's going to moderate and discuss and, smooth things out. He's still discussing things at a fairly high level of abstraction here as well. Very interesting. So let's follow Rawls and what he seems to be up to here. So again, the subject of justice is not about everything that we call just or unjust. Remember, the word just has a huge scope, and Rawls is not trying to talk about everything that we mean or intend when we talk about what's just. He's only talking about this basic structure of society, the BSS. Now, remember that this basic structure of society, this concept of a basic structure of society, is a foundational one. It has a huge effect on our lives, but it's not equal to our lives. So again, he's not talking about everything. So he's setting up some defenses here that, look, don't criticize me for not talking about everything when I'm admitting full well that I cannot talk about everything. All right, so what's this BSS, this vague thing that Rawls is talking about? It really deals with major social institutions, and he lists some of them. And the fact that he lists some of them tells you what he thinks the society that he wants to talk about is kind of like. And it's not surprising. It's it's arguably a liberal-ish democracy. It's not a purely theoretical approach to society. There's a lot of content built into the story already, and Rawls freely admits that. Later in his other works, he's going to talk about different societies that are quite other than a liberal democracy. So what does he mean? Like your political, the fact that you have a political constitution, well, there goes societies that are largely well, certainly a kingdom or something like that, where you have a supreme leader whose will is law, that isn't governed by a political constitution. Rawls isn't talking about that kind of society. Could that kind of society be just? Well, perhaps, but it's not within his scope of analysis here. So it's quiet. The theory of justice here is quiet on that. It's not talking about those kinds of societies. It's talking about societies that have a political constitution, so there would be some rule of law. And again, like what Rawls talked about at the beginning, equals, governed by the rule of law, certain kinds of rights that you can't barter or take away, etc., etc. There would be some kind of economic organization, some kinds of governing principles. Again, you would assume that these things are not just random, that they apply to, that is, by that I mean they apply to everyone equally. There would be competitive markets. Well, that certainly rules out certain societies where you don't have competitive markets. That's why I said this is kind of a liberal, democracy. Not democracy always in voting, but democracy in the sense of rule of law, right? So there's different ways you can understand the concept of democracy. It's not just voting. I mean, you could have a society where there was lots of voting, but it might not be able to change fundamental things. It's like that old Mark Twain joke, right? If voting mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. But in any case, so you have political constitution, an economic organization, you have competitive markets, you have private property. Again, that's a certain kind of society that has private property. Not all societies do. Can you have a just society without private property? Rawls isn't talking about that here. So again, keep in mind what he's talking. And the family, well, that certainly lets out... that certainly separates him from Plato, right? In the Republic, who thought we should get rid of the family. Aristotle, by the way, didn't. He criticized Plato for that. And Rawls is like, yeah, the family is a major social institution. And by and large, that seems to be that family is an interesting concept because it's very plastic, right? We have the traditional notions of family, and then in our time, we still have people, stressing the importance of family, and the concept of family, of course, has its, has had its boundaries enlarged and changed and shaped. And so the discussion has gone off in what exactly constitutes a family, etc., etc. But for Rawls, it's a major social institution. So again, that would not Plato's Republic here. Okay, so this BSS, this basic structure of society, sets up starting points for lives. And a lot of it's undeserved, right? As Rawls says, it sets up some great starting points, right? And some not so great, some terrible, some in between, etc., etc. But basically, the BSS often creates deep inequalities, right? So some people just have a great start in life, they get everything, and then some people they have terrible starts in life. And so what we want to do is bring the principles of justice to correct as much as we can for that. How can we do that? Without, and this is the key thing, without trying to eradicate all inequality, without trying to just steamroller and have an absolute level thing. Is there a way that we can have, shall we say, Rawls doesn't use this term, but you can think of it sort of as an adjusted inequality? Well, if you start off with something that's bad here, we try to bring in policies to help you out a little bit. That helps maybe people that are much more advantaged way less, and it helps the people that are much more disadvantaged a lot more, and a sliding scale, like sort of the lower down the more help you get, so that we're trying to level things out without sort of hammering everything into one level, sort of purely equal situation. Anyway, so that's to come, but that's what Rawls is after. But he recognizes that the BSS often can be terribly unfair, and what at setting up these inequalities. And so the principles of social justice, right? We still haven't said really what those are, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's the first target. They must apply as to this BSS, to this basic structure of society. Now, we still haven't talked about how we get those principles. It's through some kind of a fair agreement. So that's justice is fairness. It's the manner in which the principles of social justice are selected, right? That's the whole thing of justice as fairness. Again, we'll dig into that a little bit more later on. So to round out this this section 2 of chapter 1, justice as fairness, Rawls says, look, once again, he stresses the limitations. We've seen him talk already about, I'm doing kind of a high level abstract analysis here. And here he lays it out even a little bit more. So again, he's, trying to show you what he's talking about, what he's not. He says, okay, so Rawls's inquiry has two fundamental limitations. It says something like this. First, he is trying to come up with a reasonable conception of justice, like these principles, reasonable set of principles of justice for a closed society, isolated. That's really what he means. So once again, he's not talking about a real country that has to deal with all other kinds of countries. He's really just talking about an ideal society that's closed off. What could we say that would constitute principles of justice for that ideal society? So in that sense, he's talking a lot like Plato did in the Republic, and to some degree how Aristotle was talking in the Nicomachean Ethics. But we'll talk a little bit about Plato and Aristotle in a second. So a reasonable conception for a closed or isolated a system. So again, he's not talking about it in all cases. All right. So it's isolated from other societies. Yeah. And second, he's trying to work out these principles of justice for a well-ordered society, right? And a well-ordered society is basically it's an ideal society. So it's these limitations are not watertight; they're linked to each other. And he's looking at a society where everyone basically complies. He calls it strict compliance. So in other words, where everybody complies, right? What would it have to look like? What are the things that everyone complies with in order to have a just society? So he's not looking at, let's say, so it has strict compliance, right? Everybody's complying with it. Partial compliance, justice applied to a society of partial compliance, is more realistic, because you would have to include, what do you do with people that don't comply with agreed upon principles of justice? Like, in other words, what do you do about what law? Like law for, not law, but the legal system, where you would have to say, well, we treat those who break the law, the non-compliance, in a just manner. So partial compliance means that people sometimes and sometimes not comply, and then you would look at the justice of how you deal with people when they don't comply. So when people break the law, what is the just way in which to treat them? Not happening here. It's not talking about that, right? So if you say, how come Rawls doesn't talk about the prison system? How come Rawls isn't talking about blah, 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 these kinds of things when stuff goes wrong? Because he's working with a model of a well-ordered society under strict compliance. What's the value? Well, in science and all the time, they use ideal models. Newton's laws and all these things are ideal models. And then you, after you get the ideal model straight, you try and explain deviations from the model. So the model is a kind of blueprint, right, that you use, and then you add, you know, things like forces of friction and wind resistance and et cetera, to the model to try and see if you can get a better explanation of what you actually see. So ideal models are used in the sciences and in the political sciences, political philosophy, all the time. This is nothing new here. And it's important. It is an important tool in the academics arsenal. So working with strict compliance, and so we don't have all the messiness of the society in which there is disobedience or, again, partial compliance. Rawls admits that some might say, hey, this is very different. I've been trying to pull Rawls closer to the tradition in a previous video, you know, and we'll see in the next video how, you know, he's in the social contract, a version of the social contract history, tradition, and again, we'll look at that in a little bit more, sort of along the lines of Kantian constructivism, and not like Hobbes. So there's different families within the social contract tradition, and we'll look a little bit how Rawls fits into one of them. But here, Rawls wants to say that he fits in with Aristotle, as a matter of fact. And keep in mind, though, that you know, understanding what Aristotle meant by justice is it's a contentious issue, right? Scholars disagree, and Rawls, while he wasn't, you know, a scholar of Aristotle, he picks up on a certain interpretation of Aristotle through and Plato, primarily through a couple of major scholars of the day that would be back in the 60s, what they thought. So he thinks he's aligning himself with Aristotle and Plato, but keep in mind that's a version of Aristotle and Plato that Rawls himself picked up through other scholars. Anyways, all very interesting, but let's press on a bit. He says that it's one thing that he's got that in common with these ancients is the Greek concept of pleonexia, and pleonexia is something that you find in discussions of Plato in the opening books of the Republic, and in the books of in the chapters and sections of the Nicomachean Ethics. Pleonexia is an important notion in trying to describe justice. And pleonexia is, if you wanted in pleonexia, all right, so there's a transliteration. It's not a word we have actually in English, but that's written in Roman script. So pleonexia, what exactly is it? Well, to be involved in pleonexia is really the idea of trying to get something at the expense of another. So something that's not really yours, but to the detriment of another. So gaining advantage by seizing that which is due to others, and that can be done, of course, in a variety of ways. I could exhibit pleonexia through theft, right? Trying to gain advantage by by stealing something, right? So somebody works hard and produces something, and then I steal it, and that's an example of trying to grasp and gain advantage over others by seizing what belongs to them, like their property. I could do it by denying what's rightfully someone's. Let's say I gain advantage over someone by borrowing from them. You know, I gain advantage by borrowing and not returning it, right? I borrowed money or a lawnmower or something like that, and I never return it, and I gain an advantage that way. You find discussions of pleonexia in Plato's Republic, in the great scuffle and kerfuffle between Thrasymachus and Socrates regarding justice and its use. And Thrasymachus basically holds the view that humans, like the natural state is of us is pleonexia, right? We're just naturally want to seize an advantage over others, and justice is some sort of terrible limitation of us. And so Socrates wants to counter that and talk about, no, justice is a good thing, and you're better off being just. And Thrasymachus is not really buying it. Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics, says that a person has a character, has a just character if they have a stable disposition to act justly and to control this pleonexia. And you will ultimately, once you control it all and you get all these virtues in line and your character is all stable, and you're observing all these sort of kind of quasi laws of virtue that Aristotle talks about, you will end up having a happy life, the achievement of eudaimonia in the Aristotelian system. And Rawls says, well, you're going to get underneath all this stuff with Aristotle is a presupposition of what it is to be a proper person, a fully functioning, healthy person. Like when you look at the acorn and say, what is this supposed to be? And if someone plants it and it grows into a spindly thing, you said, well, that didn't become a real oak tree. Well, if a person grows up and becomes nasty and twisted and horrible, that didn't become a quote unquote proper person. So underneath this is a idea of what you're entitled to and what you're as a proper person is. There's a teleological aspect to it. And this idea of what it is to be a proper person and get all the stuff that you're entitled to and not more than you're entitled to, there is a sort of a fundamental kind of set of entitlements. And Rawls thinks that that comes from the BSS, right? So he thinks in that sense, he might disagree with what the just BSS would look like, but he's agreeing with Aristotle that what sets up all the entitlements and all the things that people are justly awarded is a function of the justice of the BSS itself. And in that sense, he thinks that he's largely in line with what the ancients thought, that the manner and of looking at these things, but more importantly, what exactly the subject of justice was truly all about.